Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, 1 star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right under Jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. No, 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 no,
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs. This week we have special guest Joel Byars. Joel is an Atlanta, Georgia-based stand-up comedian, educator, author, and podcaster. Having grown up in a house full of educators, Joel's combined his passion for educating and entertaining by hosting his award-winning Hot Breath podcast, teaching a weekly comedy class at the Joel Byars School of Comedy in Atlanta, and co-authoring the Comics Playbook with MIT alum Dr. Robert Joseph. All of Joel's professional endeavors are designed to help people discover their creative potential. Joel's story has been featured in publications ranging from Atlanta Magazine, Atlanta Business Chronicle, Creative Loafing's Best of Atlanta, and having been selected as the Morning Person of the Day by Creative Mornings. Some of his accolades also include writing for Comedy Central's Roast Battle at the prestigious Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal, and having been crowned the national champion of the Search for the One comedy competition in Washington, D.C. Without any further ado or ass kissing, please allow us to join our special guest, Joel Byars.
Hey, Joel, what's up?
Hello. We made it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, so this conversation, just to give people a little backstory, we actually reached out to Joel. God, I mean, maybe it's been like
About
a year ago now.
Yeah.
It was literally about a year.
Did you finally get the website done?
We got the website done, and it all ended up being done by me. So
excellent. Oh, that seems to be how it ends up
happening. You know?
Yeah. So we reached out to Joel at the time. I think it was about the same time we had comedian Marcus on the show, and we really had a good conversation with Marcus. And we thought, hey, God, we should get more comedians on the show. And we came across Joel's podcast, Hot Breath, on iTunes or someplace, and we decided to reach out to him, see if he'd be interested in being on the show. At the time, he was undergoing the aforementioned website reconstruction, and wasn't able to do it. So we kind of kept tabs for a little while, and actually, kind of out of the blue, out of nowhere, Joel hit us back up. I don't know how long ago it's been, a couple weeks ago anyway, and we got him back on the books. So we're super thrilled to have you, and great to catch up.
Yeah.
I respect your audience so much that I want to be able to deliver as much value as possible.
I like it.
A year ago, it wouldn't have been the same Joel. So
well, that's good, because we barely respect our audience. So if you can take it to another level, that wouldn't be a bad thing either. I'm just playing, guys. We love you.
Hey, I'm in that audience.
So cool. Well, so let's, I guess, kind of get a little backstory and start from the beginning a little bit. From the intro, we talked about having grown up in a house full of educators, but here you are, a comedian, among other things. Let's talk about who you are, where you come from, where you live, that kind of good stuff.
Joel Byars. People on YouTube can get the wave. People listening are like, wait, what? He already
What
stalls?
is he doing? God,
This guy's a comedian? He can't even
not
speak.
very articulate, this guy.
Yeah. I was born in Somerville, Georgia. Somerville, nice. If you're from there. It's a lot of meth in Somerville. So my mom,
sounds like our hometown.
Yeah, I just spent a week in Columbus. I don't know if it's near there, but I was in Columbus, Georgia for.
I've done comedy down there. Yeah, in South Georgia.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, it was nice. The people were great. Salt of the earth folks. It was a good time.
Yeah, so I was born there and then grew up around the Atlanta area and always have had a passion for comedy. Started with Sinbad's Afros and Bell Bottoms.
Yeah, I'm still into afros and bell bottoms, actually.
I had some slacks made that were bell bottoms just because. Why not?
I can think of several reasons why not, but whatever works for you, man.
Yeah, I miss that guy Sinbad.
Jinkos back then.
Chico's. We got to bring those back.
Well, they're sitting in a a box or like a rail car somewhere. They're still out there. We just have to find them.
But that's what it's always been in the back of my brain to actually pursue comedy. My mom tells me this story when I was in like first grade or something. I was in a church play. And I stole the microphone from like the lady in charge and just started rah, 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 making noise. And I got laughs. Apparently I killed.
Yeah, for anybody who hasn't seen it, on YouTube, this is still the bit he's doing, just.
Yeah, it's my best show of the day.
Walks up on stage, not even scheduled that night, just steals the mic and goes rah, rah, rah.
Yeah, it's kind of his rap.
Dressed like baby Jesus the whole night. I'm in a manger. Check it out on Netflix. It's in Spanish. And so it's always been in the back of my brain, but then to actually make it my professional endeavor, it required me to go to college, spend a bunch of money, get to senior year and be like, well, I've lost all my money. What else can I lose? Might as well do comedy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I tried it senior year at an open mic in front of like 8 people. 4 of those people were the staff. And it went sufficient. I didn't kill, but I did enough to want to come back. And since then, it was almost like I saw the Matrix. I took the blue pill that night, and now I can only live in this comedy matrix. And it's now everything I think, eat, sleep, and breathe is just comedy.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. So I mean, for people, and we'll get into this stuff a little deeper, but I mean, you just to that end, you've got the comedy podcast, you've got the comedy school that you guys do in Atlanta, or that you do in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. I mean, clearly it sort of permeates everything. Where did this? You've had this sort of ongoing drive for comedy and have been interested in that all these years. You've survived the open mic. What does the rest of this process work like? Like, I mean, I've heard enough, comedians and stuff on podcasts to know that it takes, some reps before you start getting real comfortable doing this kind of thing. Sounds like maybe you already had the personality for it. You weren't too afraid of being booed off the stage. But I mean, can you talk a little bit about just kind of those early years and getting through, to some level of sort of professional proficiency?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I took a disciplined approach to comedy to where I didn't even try to market myself or sell myself until like 6 years in, maybe 7. I'm about 9.5 years in now, but I didn't even think about how am I going to, get sufficient money to where I can be full-time. Like, my first thought was I just need to get really good at this and create a product that is worth selling. So that hustle means I'm working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, working I think it was like 7:30 to 5 or 6 every day, and then out till 1 a.m. doing open mics and just repeat for like months and months. I worked there for probably about a year, saved up enough money, and then slowly from there made every decision based on getting closer to pursuing comedy full time. So I moved out of my mom's. Should have mentioned that. Moved back in with mom and worked at Enterprise, saved up some money, got out on my own, which means I moved into a studio apartment into the hood of Atlanta. So I was on like the front lines of gentrification there. I was one of the sacrificial lambs. And it was a unique experience. I got a lot of good material out of it, but it's one of those things I always, and I think you guys can agree, when you're like pursuing your passion, it's almost like by any means necessary. It's like, I know this is a means to an end. I will live here. I will live on $8 an hour. I was washing dishes, and then I became a hotel minibar attendant.
Oh, so moving up the chain.
Oh, dude.
Moving up the chain.
I want that job.
Free food.
Little bottles of.
I went on a little mini tour with a couple other comics, maybe 4 or 5 years in. And it was about a week-long tour. I just took a bunch of Cliff Bars. And I ate Cliff Bars for like a week. Seriously, just on this tour to save money, because it was that was the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of balanced nutrition, though, it may be about as good as it gets. So it's probably not that bad, really. I mean, you make it sound like a horror story, but
And they got different flavors, I've heard.
Yeah, it was. I had chocolate chip and the like the oatmeal raisin were the two flavors we had at the hotel
nice.
I was at. So all the expired ones I just took and
Right,
just
whatever was
rationed
there.
them away.
It's past 8 in one day. It's
Yeah.
Well, so maybe talk about that a little bit, sort of these mini tours and sort of life on the road. I don't think a lot of people.
Well,
I mean,
let's go
Is that
before
too
the
far ahead?
road. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go to like
before
first
the
open
Before the
mic,
road.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
You know, like because figuring it out's got to be tricky. You know, like timing, everything. How long until you felt comfortable to kind of go and maybe do a headlining spot or do the road tour, the mini tour? What was the pre that? You know.
Yeah, I mean the hustle, seriously, for anybody that's thinking about doing comedy, and this is the best advice I've gotten, is you have to live on stage. Like comedy is a language, and the only way you can really exercise it is by living on stage and getting that feedback from the audience. So every year I get more comfortable, but this is a lifelong endeavor. And I've interviewed comics 20 years in who are like, I think I'm just now starting to get this thing. So it's a never-ending mindset for a comedian, but maybe about 6 years in is when I started to feel like, okay, I can at least stand on stage confidently and really engage an audience. But it's a never-ending learning curve,
Well,
and
I
that's
think
why I
that's-
love it.
yeah, I think that's a good observation because there's so many, and maybe it's sort of fueled by social media a little bit, but I think a lot of people expect that they're the funniest kid in their fraternity or whatever, and they can just walk up on stage and command an audience. Like maybe they don't appreciate the craft quite as much as they should. But I think maybe social media, just seeing people on Instagram or whatever, it's sort of, you don't think about all that goes into it over years to be able to do what you're doing, what appears very simple. And, we had another guest on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how he was a 10-year overnight success. And it's kind of that mentality, right? I mean, for the outside in people, the people looking, at your Instagram account or whatever, they might go, oh my God, this guy Joel, he's got it all figured out. What's he doing? They're not looking at the prior 9 years of experience, So it's a good observation to sort of point that out, that, yes, it requires reps, and there are actually no shortcuts.
There's no way around the work. And that is true with the internet. Everybody wants to microwave their success. But there is no way. You can be funny on social media, get on that stage.
Yeah.
You'll find out real quick how funny you really are. And that's why I love it.
After
it's
a minute of dead air and not knowing what to say, it's like, crap.
30 seconds. If one joke misses, you can crumble on stage. You just be like, oh, everybody hates me. I quit. I should move back home. Like, all of that goes to your head.
Well,
But
and the thing is, too, is like you could have had a great set the night before and it killed it, just totally knocked it out of the park. And then you come in and you have one kind of thing and it ruins your night. I've had
a set at 8 p.m. that killed, did the same set, same venue, same set, bomb, complete silence. Almost
Weird.
got 8 o'clock was like a standing ovation. 10 o'clock was like a walking ovation. Like people were just out of there, man. It's a bizarre conundrum, but it's the never-ending craft of comedy that keeps me awake and alive.
Well, and having done the reps and having done the 6 years of stand or like walk on and whatever slot you can get, it's those experiences that you can pull from when you have that rough night. Oh, my set that's working right, that I'm doing right now isn't really working. Let me pull something from 6 years ago that worked and see if that goes. And you can kind of pull bits and pieces from previous experiences and pull it in and hopefully turn the crowd around,
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, to that end, you don't know all those tricks if you haven't put in the time.
if you haven't put in the time.
Exactly. I used to be like, my set list would be like word for word, verbatim. This is my first word all the way to the last word I'm saying. A lot with like my interview style too. It used to be like, okay, I'm talking about this and then this and then this and then this. And it was almost like a script. So now the more you do it, the more comfortable you get and the more you're able to just kind of freestyle in a sense, but you have a game plan, but you can call audibles at any time.
Well, and I think maybe just that you're a podcaster, you can share this experience. I was actually just talking to my wife about this the other day, and I was talking, this episode that we're taping right now will be 113. We've been at this, a little more than 2 years now. And I was telling my wife that I think in maybe the last 3 shows, I feel like I've turned another corner in terms of the type of conversations we're having. And maybe it's a combination, better guests. Maybe it doesn't really have that much to do with me, but I think that
It has everything to do with you. Right?
So, but I feel like, we keep, in the spirit of continuing to grow, I feel like every so often I find these little increments where I go, you know what, these last few shows have been incredible compared to the prior however many. And we noticed that really early on. When this show began, we did our first 10 episodes, just Mike and I solo. And it was kind of this marketing show, and we would, study up on some subject and read through bulleted lists and stuff, much like what you're saying, where you sort of had a structure or a script to read from. And they were horrible. They're really dry. They're hard to follow. They're, really boring to listen back to. And then as soon as we started having guests on, we sort of turned a corner, and our first guest changed the whole dynamic. And then all of a sudden we were doing better. And then, by episode 100, we're doing better. And now by episode 113 even, there's a new incremental change. And so I just can't, overstate the value of, just keep grinding and keep working.
Consistency, that's half the game, is just being consistent and persistent.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, and so let's, you've done a few shows, you're feeling pretty good on stage, you start to hit the road, you've got your Cliff Bars in hand. What do these first couple tours look like for you? Like, what's the life of a budding comedian look like? Especially, and I know there are different scenes throughout the country, but were you like in an Atlanta scene or an East Coast scene?
Were they
or
putting
where were
you up
found?
in hotels that you could pay for by the hour, or did you get a full night's stay?
I mean, I've seen Crashing, so I feel like I have a pretty good idea of how this works.
That gives a realistic depiction of the grind. I mean, it's
the hourly hotel rates.
No,
it was it was 3 dudes in a single hotel room. That's part of it. It is showing up to a venue that forgot they even booked your show. Like, that happened on that tour we did.
Wow.
But this was 3 young comedians just trying to figure it out as we go.
Sure.
But even in the evolution of it, you get into a better venue and then maybe a little bit better of a hotel. Or sometimes it's a better venue, but then it doesn't come with a hotel. Like, there's pitfalls along the way at every step. And there's always these moments where you get booked at like a big gig and it's like all inclusive and they're taking care of you and you feel like royalty, and there's a spread in the green room and the hotel is really nice and they have travel for you. And then you get back on the real road, which is like a smoky bar that you have to perform at, and then you go stay at a hotel where the door's on the outside. If the hotel even has doors, sometimes you're just like, I'll just sleep in my car.
Right.
Like that's the whole hustle. And and my congratulations on 113 episodes too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I can tell you, people know that do podcasting, this is a full-time job.
It really is.
Podcasting is work. And I could say out of like the 180 interviews I've done, a common
You've
thread.
done 180?
Yeah, I just hit 180 this week.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Do you do it on a weekly kind of basis, or just when they come around kind of thing?
Yeah, every Monday at 8 a.m.
Okay.
I release a new one.
Nice.
And it comes out to be, every professional comedian is like, one day they're opening for Amy Schumer in Madison Square Garden in front of thousands of people. The next day, they're in the basement of a bar performing for 10 people. Like, at any moment, like, no matter where you get, unless until you hit like the 1%, like a Kevin Hart, but like at any moment, there is that balance of comedy. She always keeps you honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have a little experience with that too. Just having, back in the olden days, I used to road manage bands and stuff. And I got really accustomed to backstage and green rooms and free tickets and things like that. And then as I moved out of the industry, like, now everything costs money, and it's just like I never go. And when I do go to a show, it's like I don't have access, so I hate this. I just sit around and pout.
I literally was talking to him 5 minutes ago. I was like, "Hey, you want to go down to the show?" And say, "I don't know him. I can't get access.
Yeah,
I don't want to go."
I was like, they're old friends. If we can get access, I'll go. But if not, nah, I'm not going as a fan. But I'm ruined.
I'm
for
above
it.
that.
That's right. Yeah, pinky's out, man. So that's awesome. Well, cool. So let's talk about kind of of the next step as you sort of began transitioning? I'm really curious because, so as we mentioned at the top, you have done or were sort of raised by educators, or I assume that's what that means, to have grown up in a house full of educators. I'm surrounded by them myself. My mom's a teacher, my wife's a teacher, everything, and so I sort of understand this drive or this interest to teach. And so I'm curious, at what point did you feel like, you know what, I'm established enough as a comedian, I feel comfortable enough in my skin, I feel like I have real valuable information. Now what do I do with it? Was it the birth of the podcast next, or did you go into the podcasting school or the school, or what was the trajectory from there?
The teaching started first, and I was doing improv classes, and I had done some sketch classes at the same theater, and then they asked if I'd ever thought about a stand-up class. And I was like, well, I know what I think about people that teach stand-up classes. There are people who teach stand-up classes who literally don't even do stand-up. It's
really easy, right? It's just yes and not only that, but it's pretty much it, I think.
And improv, but like it's stand-up. There's a whole mathematical formula to it.
There is?
I didn't. 1 + 2 = boo. That's what I've heard so far. That was improv right there. Hey.
See what he did there?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I realized, well, it was an opportunity to maybe teach it the right way and actually come from a place of, okay, here's what I've learned, but now you have to go out and actually execute. I'm not just going to like hold your hand and write jokes for you. It's like, here are the formulas. Now go out and plug them in and see how they work for you. So it started out with teaching under this comedy school. And then the podcast happened because Atlanta Comedy had 10 comics on Last Comic Standing on NBC in like the finals.
Oh, wow. And
I thought it would be a good time capsule to interview all 10 of these comedians.
Didn't Marcus make it?
Yeah, this guy Marcus we had on was a Last Comic guy from Salt Lake. So it was kind of
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a good opportunity just to kind of showcase Atlanta comedy, and really this was several years ago, and it's even booming more now than it was then. But I started out as just 10 episodes just to capture their story. And I took a little bit of a break, not really knowing what to do with it. And now it just kind of evolved into a comedy education platform. As I started to take inventory, and as you do get further into your professional career, and you're like, okay, what am I doing? What is my mission? Why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? And when I took time, which I think is valuable for every business, to really take time to ask yourself those questions, that really started to provide the answers for me of like, why am I doing this? Oh, okay. Who is it for? Oh, great. Okay. So should I do this? Would it benefit them? So that really helped to find clarity in what I'm doing, which is now all I want people to think with like Joel Byars is that they're going to laugh and learn. So whether that's my classes, whether it's my podcast, my stand-up, I just want people to hear Joel byers and be like, all right, I'm going to laugh, but I'm also going to learn something.
So, like, what are you trying to teach people at a stand-up show?
Teach them about me. I also do social commentary to a degree as well, and showing my perspective on, like, race or certain socioeconomic situations. So it's like, it's not just me, like, doing knock-knock jokes. Because
you can't beat a knock-knock joke, though.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
solid. I would lead with one.
Joke to death. I want people to actually. I want to create memorable materials. So my favorite compliment is when people come up to me afterwards, and they have, oh, that's just like my wife, or that's just like my cousin, or I went to a school like that. And a lot of times we see a comedian, we can watch them for an hour and not remember anything they said. I want to make sure that my material is memorable enough for when they come up, they actually have a direct compliment about what you said resonated with me. And that's how you create that fan base and that connection.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, too, because, we do a lot of entrepreneurial shows and have a lot of perspectives on that. And it's funny to hear you talk about your stand-up career even as a business, right? Because, that is what it is. Ultimately, you're trying to make money and provide and do all that from this career. So, it really is a business, but I think a lot of people think of it as your talent on stage and that's what you do, but they don't really think about like all the rest of the business around it. And what's interesting is what you just described is, brand experience to a T. Basically you're developing this brand and you're looking for ways to relate, and that's the whole name of the game when it comes to branding is trying to, tell a relatable story, whether it's, through a pair of Nikes or it's, through a stand-up routine. By identifying content that you can deliver that is relatable, stories that resonate with people, my wife did this or that or whatever. I think that's all, really strong brand building that you're doing, And so I think that's really, I don't know. It seems like a different perspective than I've heard from other comics where, they're really more concerned with getting up on stage or whatever, not the business of developing this career.
How far into it were you before you realized it was a business and had to treat it as such? Because I was probably 6-7 years into DJing before I thought, I can actually do this as a full-time deal.
Yeah, I think it probably was about 6 or 7 years for me and the stage is so valuable, and it like even at this point, it's like I'll take a less paying gig if it has more stage time, because like I said, comedy is a language, and the only way to learn it and get better is by actually doing it on stage. There's no way around that. But what people forget is it's called show business. It's 2 separate jobs. So like as a comedian, if you want to pursue it full time, congratulations, you just quit your day job to acquire 2 part-time jobs. And you have to turn into full-time employment. So the show is you have to write, you have to get on stage, you have to refine, you have to record your sets, you have to review them. The business, okay, you have to figure out how to get booked. You have to book more shows so your show can get better, but then also figure out how to brand yourself and figure out a way to carve out a niche audience, because as we can see on Netflix, comedy is more saturated than ever.
Yeah.
So how are you going to be unique? So it is taking that time to look at what you're doing, but also what you want to do. What is your 2-year plan? What is your 5-year plan? What is your week plan? Do you wake up with a plan? Like all those little things you hear someone like Mark Cuban say, and you're like, but he's a billionaire businessman. It's like the same principles apply to if you want to make this your job, you have to treat it like one. You have to wake up and work.
There's 2 points that you just talked on that I want to kind of elaborate on, and it's the show part, and A, your writing process, and B, the fact that you record your sets and review them. That to me is the step that a lot of people don't actually take, and I can only relate it to like the DJ world, but for me, after I have a set or play for a night, usually when I come back home, I'll pull my laptop out and I review the songs that I played, and I try and remember the night, and like, this song didn't do so well. I'm going to kind of pull it out of my library, but this song worked good. I'm going to move it to a different time slot, or I just kind of reanalyze the night while it's fresh in my head, instead of waiting until the next week when my next show is and trying to remember, this worked and this didn't, and it's not fresh. I think there's a lot of parallels and similarities in performance for whether it's a band, a DJ, a comedian, or whatever, anyone that's going up on stage. They kind of have to step back and reflect on, the night, review it, recap it, and try and improve. And so I like that you pointed that out. You got the show and you got the business. And the show entails a lot of stuff. I mean, the prep work, finding the music, writing, everything. Like for you, writing. What's your writing process like? What do you do? Do you I've heard Joe Rogan will go in and take a voice recorder into his float tank with him and just take notes, But I mean, what's your style like? What do you do?
He gets into Joe Rogan's float tank.
Yeah.
And
hey, Joe, what's up?
I'll text Joe and
Don't
he'll
mind
fly
me.
me over on his SpaceX flight he got from Elon Musk, and we'll just float, bro.
Just
But see, that's what's encouraging is like, Joe Rogan's been doing stand-up over 20 years, and you're like, he has it figured out. He's like, no, this guy works. This guy writes. He listens. He refines. Like, you're not immune to the work, no matter how far into this game you get. So me personally, my process is more of like a free writing exercise where I'll have just like a page and I'll just free write, almost they call it a brain dump as well. Sometimes if I don't have anything to write about, I'll just free write. I don't have anything to write about and just see where that goes. or if I have specific topics or jokes I'm working on, I'll free write about those, maybe find some funny words, funny phrase, or sometimes even what's cool with comedy, a lot of your jokes don't even start out funny. They just start out interesting. And then from that interesting concept, you start to build funny around it.
Okay.
So it really starts with just kind of purging of ideas and then picking the ones that your sense of humor picks up on, because it's a sense of humor. I consider it our sixth sense, where we can actually sense and have an instinct towards what is funny or not. So I always follow that instinct, and it helps me to just kind of get ideas from like my head to my hand, and then from there get more analytical on how to actually build it up.
Execute. Yeah.
So that's actually an interesting topic too. Maybe we could talk a little bit about is I think part of that being able to listen to your sixth sense is maybe it's a innate confidence, or maybe it's something that you train up and you practice on over years and become good at, but being able to listen to yourself and trust yourself and actually do that versus sitting and thinking about what somebody else might think about it or whatever. Can you talk about, have you had any struggles like that in your career? What did it take to overcome those things, that kind of deal?
Yeah, it's kind of like with repetition, the more you do it, the more confident you get at it. So the more you perform, the more confident you get at your ability to perform and acclimate to any situation. So the early jokes were more of just like a knock-knock joke. I mean, just trying to get a laugh for the sake of a laugh. And if they didn't laugh, if you want to talk about dealing with failure, if like my opening joke didn't get a laugh, the set was like over for me. Like I would just, all right, well, I guess this set's done. And I would like turn around and start like rubbing the wall and just
see, it works. It works.
I've like rolled around on the ground. Like I've been on stage and just rolled around on the ground. Like if like me saying hello didn't get a laugh, my confidence would just be shattered. But it took me just getting on stage. And it's like working a muscle. The more you work out, the stronger the muscle gets, the more confident and more use you can get out of it. Same thing with stand-up. It's just putting in the reps, and it's just understanding this is part of the process.
Yeah. So
this is part of getting better.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. So I guess then to that end, or to sort of take this to the next step, maybe in the frame of your comedy class or in your own career, do you believe that this is something that anybody can do? Do you need to be born a comic, or can people train these skills and learn these skills?
I honestly think people can learn the skills. It's just, are they willing to put in the work? Because there is underlying everything in comedy, there is a structure. There is a certain mechanism at play when you're watching a comedian, whatever it is, it's kind of like, I guess, music. I mean, they're all playing musical notes. It's just like, to what degree or to what language, what is their song compared to someone else? Every comedian sings their own song, but we're all still using kind of the same mechanics that can be learned. To what degree, there's only one Jimi Hendrix. So, but I think anyone can actually do stand-up comedy proficiently if they're willing to do the work. That's what most of my students don't stick with it. Most of my students aren't even there to pursue comedy full-time either. A lot of them are in public speaking or in sales or in human resource, just trying to get a better sense of their humor and how it can kind of empower
and
their
actually,
own.
I wanted to segue into that a little bit too, because it's become such a common thing among like CEOs and things like that to take stand-up courses or improv courses anyway, just to, better learn how to craft their voice. And I guess that's what I was alluding to a little bit with this idea of, can anybody do it? Because, I'm starting to, entertain ideas of doing some speaking and things like that.
Stand-up.
And this is one of the things that had occurred to me was, an improv class or something like that. And, I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts, so it was something that had come up.
say we both just sign up for an open mic and go at it.
Seriously, I would love to hear how that goes.
Ooh.
I'll record it for you.
Bunch of knock-knock jokes, right? Yeah, I recommend it. Anyone who's ever even thought about trying comedy, even if you don't take a class, just get out and try it. You're going to learn an entire new appreciation for this craft. It's a different game. When you're funny at the water cooler, get up in the lights, see what happens.
Yep.
Yeah, I can only imagine. For me, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
What's I'm sure over the years you've had some pretty interesting experiences, but is there anyone that stands out like crazy heckler that just riled you, or like a weird experience that happened at one of your shows?
Oh my gosh. There's,
$4
and
million.
I'll ask my guests this too. I always ask like my guests the story of them getting booed on stage or something, like their worst bomb. Like, I mean, I've done shows on buses. I've done them on sidewalks. Done them in strip clubs.
Oh, that had to be fun.
Then of course, on the inverse, I've done them in theaters and churches and comedy clubs. So it's like, it's the whole gambit. But there is one place. It was I got booed at a place called Taboo. So
sounds like one of the strip club ones. Yeah.
I should have known going into that one that Taboo was in the name, so I should have known that Boo was going to be on stage. And it was a nightclub that was trying comedy, and there were couches on stage. It was a terrible setup for comedy. All that to say, I didn't do well enough. And what was bad about it, as a comedian, like if you see a comedian not doing well, every joke that misses, they're shrinking on stage. They're getting smaller and smaller until they just want to get back into the fetal position. So my first joke hit well. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. And then each joke after that incrementally lost the audience's attention more and more until I could start to hear people in the back talking like on the right side. And then I could hear it start to spread around to the back. And then a lady in the far left back corner just boos me. And then that empowers the audience to be like, oh, yeah, we don't have to listen to this. And then someone on the right side started booing. And then it just became like, I won't say everyone was booing, but it was kind of like just over here, a boo, and then a boo missile over here. And then someone in the middle would boo me. And then it started to become maybe around 20 or so people out of the people in there were starting to boo me. I didn't really know what to do, so I just booed them back. That was my solution to the problem. I was like,
boo you too.
And I like laid down on the couch that was on stage. It was like, boo me, I'm terrible. And I was. And I shouldn't have been there. But it's one of those things, failure is the best teacher. And I've never forgotten that night. Just like the night I had a killer show at 8 and then the 10 o'clock show, I bombed horribly. You just never forget those experiences, but they make you stronger. And now I know moving forward how to deal with those situations.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a really common thing nowadays that people want to try and avoid the painful. They don't want to do the things that hurt. And I think you have to. Like, I mean, if you don't get a poor critique or you don't get booed off stage at least once, you don't have any understanding of what that's like, so you don't know how to avoid it, or how to operate better through it. I mean, as bad as it sounds or as horrible as it sounds, I mean, it probably would behoove you to be booed a few times. Like, I mean, you need to understand when you're hitting and when you're missing, and because otherwise you just assume you're great. You know,
I used to work.
Everyone bombs.
Yeah, I used to work at this venue. I'll avoid names because I still have friends there. But when I first started working,
it was taboo in Georgia.
Flashbacks.
I came in and I essentially took over the role of the club DJ. I kicked the other guy out, and he had friends that still worked at that venue. And I was playing this set, and all of a sudden in the back of the room, someone was booing me. I'm like, man, I have never been booed. This is the first time I've ever been, like, as a DJ, been booed. And it wasn't that I think it was that they were there supporting their old friend who just lost his job, and I had taken his role. And so I made it my personal mission that night just to kill it, just knock it out of the park, just so that, like, you want to boo me, I'll show you what I can do. And it was kind of a liberating experience for me, because before I would have just been like, whatever, I'm just going to hit play on this and walk away and screw these guys. For me, it was like, all right, I'll show you what I can do.
I feel like we have the makings of a rom-com with Drew Barrymore with Never Been Booed. I think we're on the way. So I think we're getting there. Somebody make a note.
Adam Sandler's got to be in it though, if Drew Barrymore.
I don't know. He's been really prolific lately. He might be a hard get, but I hear about this Joel guy, Byars. He might be around.
Hey, I'm available and affordable.
Excellent. That's the two things we look for in a movie star.
So
I guess let's talk a little bit too then maybe about some of the peaks in the comedy business. So at the top we mentioned, having been chosen as a national champion in the Search for the One comedy competition. And I think the other one that we mentioned, the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival, that's a huge one. Everybody knows about that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, what it was like, how you got called up, all that side of stuff?
Yeah, those are like the experiences that let you know what's possible in this game and keep you going. That one was one of the contestants on Roast Battle wanted me to be a writer for them, so they like took me up there and like they took care of everything and they got me the VIP pass. So it's like your environment really informs who you are and really teaches you kind of what you can be. So if you're around everyone in your circle is like the same as you, then everyone's staying the same. But I always try to surround myself with people that elevate my game. So that being said, I'm standing in the green room backstage and I'm like 2 feet away from like Judd Apatow and John Mulaney talking. Like it's even just thinking about it now, it's like, oh, they're just peers. Like when you get around these people at this level, you're like, oh, they're just people. They just talk and, they just happen to be really good at this. But hey, you're in the same room as them, so that must be saying something about you. So it really kind of took the lid off the jar for me and really opened up my mind to what's possible. That, oh, maybe I'm not just kind of like a local comic that, does well around the Southeast or whatever. But it's like, oh, no, I'm an international comedian who is here for a reason. So just being around that environment really inspired me to reach higher than I had been previously. And it's really the Super Bowl of comedy. Like if people don't know what Just for Laughs is, like this is the comedy festival to be at. So just to be walking around the streets and seeing a bunch of your favorite comedians, and then at every show, it's just like every famous comedian you could imagine, just hanging out at the parties and just getting to actually, instead of like looking at them on YouTube and like, hey, it's that guy, you're like right next to them talking to them as like a peer, as like an equal. It really changed my entire mindset into like this comedy game.
Well, it makes sense. They say, in a lot of business training and things like that, that you're sort of the sum of the 5 people nearest you.
You're screwed.
Yeah, I know. I've got these 2 roughnecks in here. Back to the electrical cord. We couldn't get under the door. But my other 2 friends are really high performers, so it works out really great. So we stay very average. But they say that's true, and I having been around some people like that, obviously you can take some inspiration from seeing those people. Have you ever struggled with, I wonder if this happens, when you're sitting in the room with like a Judd Apatow or whatever, and you're trying to rationalize why you're there, and you're putting it in the frame of, oh, well, I'm meant to be here, I was brought here for a purpose, blah, blah, blah. But like, do you find yourself feeling sort of this imposter syndrome or something? Like, what do I, even though maybe your logical brain is telling you that, yes, I should be here, I'm here for a reason, I'm not just standing here, serving, working the minibar. I am actually, among peers, were you able to sort of sit in that environment and go, okay, we have things in common, we're one-on-one, all that stuff? Or were you feeling sort of this idea that, I'm not here, I'm not good enough, I'm not whatever? And maybe I'm speaking to my own insecurities, but this is a topic that I'm trying to work through personally, but then also, I think for other people, it's a common feeling.
For sure. Yeah. Insecurities. I was just going through a bout with it like this week on just like, what am I doing? It's like, it's funny. All we ever see is just like, oh, they did it. Look, they're doing well. But in reality, we're all just trying to figure it out, and we're doing the best we can. Everyone's doing the best they can. But in that situation, I was somehow calm and comfortable. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's Judd Apatow right there. I was just like, oh, look, it's Judd. Like, not like we're buds, we don't text, but for some reason, I was comfortable in that situation. Maybe it's because I had been validated by the fact I was even paid to come up there and like be a part of this festival. So that aspect probably made me feel more like, oh, I do belong here because I'm wearing the same pass that they are and I'm in the same room as them. So clearly this means I'm part of this group. And it did come probably with, building up to that, being in green rooms with bigger name comics, that you're working with. It's like, okay, maybe at first you're like, I shouldn't even be in this green room. I'm just going to let them have it. I'll just be out in the audience and just waiting my turn. And then you start to meet these people and you're like, oh, there's a camaraderie with comedians that it's just, you just get this like understood respect that if you're on that stage, then it's an understood respect that, all right, you're part of the overall collective of comedy because you're willing to stand on that stage, which like 99% of people on the planet are too scared to do. So there is like this just kind of organization behind comedy that really there's competition, of course, but there's like a nurtured competitiveness that we're in this together in a sense.
Yeah, well, and I suppose as long as you don't do anything weird like stuff Kevin Hart in a backpack or something and run off, you're probably okay.
Or taking selfies, like it was all just very cool
awesome.
and just community.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, and I think that's kind of what makes it work, right? I mean, I think most of the comedy podcasts I've listened to are guys talking about their time on the road and the things they did together in the green rooms and the conversations they've had and things like that, so it makes sense.
So have you had that kind of aha moment where you're like, oh, I'm standing in front of, Joe Rogan or whoever, like your idol, and then all of a sudden he's right there. Have you had that kind of like, wow,
I've arrived
kind of moment, just knowing that you're like, who's the guy for you? Who's the guy that like you've met and you're like, I can't believe I'm sharing this stage with this guy?
Yeah, the first one would probably have been like the one that kind of opened up the door for me was like I was in the green room with Ron White.
Oh wow,
nice.
At
Smoky and
you couldn't see him through the cigar smoke.
Oh yeah,
but I'm sure he was there,
dude.
Just a little red dot moving around in the room.
Who he is on stage is who he is off stage. Like that is him. That is not an act. He is drinking. He is smoking. He is all that. And like just sitting in the green room with him and just listening, like I've always been mindful of like when I'm around people to always be learning and to always just be listening to them. So it's like if I'm in the green with Ron White and then he'll just casually say, man, if I was your age in this comedy game, I'd be in here having sex with a waitress right now.
So you went and got a waitress, right?
Yeah. Right.
Grabbed 2 waitresses.
I'll show you.
Yeah, so it makes it like lighten the load of like, you're not in here with Ron White, you're in here with another comedian.
Right.
So from then on, I kind of had that approach of like, okay, there's an understood bond we have. So just be cool. And that's how you get rebooked at places as well. Like, and same thing with any job you do. If you're easy to work with, you're going to get more work. So that bleeds very true in comedy. And all the people I've interviewed about it, they've all said the same thing when it comes to networking, that if you're cool and easy to work with, you're going to get booked. If you're a jerk, you'll get booked once maybe, but then you won't get rebooked again. And the rebook is when you really start to generate that monetary momentum, when the word of mouth will spread and you start to build up your network of paid gigs as opposed to you doing an open mic.
Well, once a venue knows that you can come in and do a good job and represent well for them and know that they can put on a show, granted the people paying for the tickets might not necessarily know you as a comic, but they're going to have a good time. And then they know that they're going to, be able to rely on you to come back and do a good job. That's key.
Well, and that goes back to that business aspect, right? Yeah. Being reliable for the people who employ you is key. So let's transition a little bit because we're starting to get later in the show, but I don't want to miss a couple of these things. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. We talked briefly earlier on about sort of the birth of it, that you had done it around these 10 entertainers that were on TV out in Georgia. I guess they were on the national program. But that was sort of the beginning of the podcast, but you mentioned earlier being 180 episodes in. So let's talk about your podcast, how it's grown and evolved and what inspired you to do the show.
Yeah, the brand identity, like we talked about earlier, and figuring out what you're doing and who you're doing it for and why you're doing it. It took me a few years to really address those questions, really find my direction. So when I did it to be a time capsule of Atlanta comedy for those comics. And I took a little break and I was like, I guess I'll just start interviewing comics again. Like my whole mission was, I want to create a podcast that I want to hear. Like every comedian and their agent has a podcast, but most comedians with a podcast is just comics on there trying to out funny each other. It's obnoxious, it's annoying, and unless you are someone with a name, people aren't going to want to listen to that. So I was trying to see how I could create a unique show in the crowded space that is comedy podcasting. So I want to make sure, one, my audio was on point. I want to make sure the audio quality was always on point. And I want to make sure that the content I created was always on point. So if it's going to be video, I want to make sure my video is high quality. If it's going to be interview, I want to make sure my interviews are so well researched that the guest is surprised at things I ask, and that listeners know if they come to Hot Breath that they're going to hear questions they won't hear anywhere else, and they're going to learn more about that guest on Hot Breath than any other interview that guest has ever been on. So that was always my mission. Make sure it's a quality podcast of well-researched interviews about comedy.
Where did the name come from, Hot Breath? You just have a stanky day and just was like, all right, here we go, let's start a podcast.
I was a fan of NPR's Fresh Air.
Okay.
And so I was like, what's a quick hit? Like, what's a 1-2, you know? So I just kind of brainstormed, and like Hot Breath stuck. And I don't know why, but I'll do this like sound effect on Hot Breath. I'll be like, and I'll do that on the podcast in the intro. And now I'll get introduced at shows where like he's the host of Hot Breath. Like it's fixed.
Have you?
But it took. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. Have you noticed an influx or a direct result from the podcast on your actual live show? Has it kind of had an effect on that?
People have come out. I host a game show here in Atlanta. People that are also recorded as a live podcast, and people came out from the podcast. Like you just never know who's listening. But what really helped me to have people actually convert from a listener to actually meeting them in person was like understanding who it was for. So I kind of I got a little bit lost in my way about halfway through my podcast, where I lost sight that it was all comedy related. And I started interviewing just Atlanta artists and other people like, oh, maybe it's an Atlanta podcast. And then my numbers started to drop. And I was like, wait, what's happening? And I was like, oh, I got away from my central mission. I got away from why I started this. And as soon as I took the time to reevaluate what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for and why I'm doing it, that's when it really started to climb. When I was talking to a specific person. Now it is an audience, but I was able to kind of boil it down to, like that avatar when I talk about it. It's that singular ideal audience member. And now everything I create is for that audience member, and it now resonates to like a big audience.
Well, that kind of makes sense. We've been, in my business, I've been working on a mission statement and core values and all that stuff. And it really helps when you have that demographic or that target to throw at, because until you know your why or the reasoning behind what you're doing, you're just kind of wandering around. I got a business, I got it working, but you don't know why you're doing it. And for you, it's like you pick your demographic, you pick the person that you think would relate to your style of comedy and just go full bore. I think it would have a direct effect on that.
Your audience tells you what they want as well. So it's important to, as you're building an audience or finding it, to like listen to what feedback you're getting and really engage with them. If someone leaves a comment, when they leave a comment on one of my posts, or they're saying, oh, I love this episode, I'll be like, oh, what did you love about it? Or if someone's like, hey, I found your podcast, I love it now. And I'll be like, oh, what do you love about it? How did you find it? Like, I gather all that information, and it all helps to actually regenerate that information into new listeners.
Yeah. Do you, you mentioned interactivity. Do you do any interactive stuff on your podcast? You mentioned you do the game show, and you put that out as a podcast. But last week, I just kind of jumped on Spotify and looked through podcasts that they had that were trending. And I came across this one called Girls Gotta Eat. And they're a couple of comedians out of New York. And they do this thing at the end of each show where they play a game with their Instagram users. And they ask questions or whatever. And they get a lot of it back and forth. And they'll read responses from a question they asked the week before. And it's turned into this kind of thing. And I really like what they're doing there. It's kind of different and unique. But have you done anything like that?
I've done Q&A episodes. So I'll go on Instagram Live and Facebook Live and do like a live episode and record the audio. And then just that'll be an episode. So I have done that, and that helps with engagement and really building community. I haven't really done anything like live at the end of a show as an actual segment, though. It's all been kind of like it's one-off episode.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
that's a good idea.
well, and that's the thing. I think there's, I mean, it's kind of the beauty of this podcasting platform, right? Is that you can go, a multitude of directions. You can really do anything you want to do. There's no boundaries. And so, but I think your idea of sort of niching down and identifying who you're actually speaking to, it's one of those things, everybody has this idea in their head that if they could just reach every human, think of how rich I'd be. Think of how many widgets I would sell if just every human would buy my product. When the reality is you probably do much better if you focus down to some subset, even if it is, 100,000 people instead of 7 billion, if 7 billion people aren't buying your product, but 100,000 people are, then, it's night and day different. And so, but I think that idea of niching, I think is something people, or niching is something that people are a little bit afraid to do. And so, so I think that's good advice.
I think it's crucial. I mean, there's that saying, there's riches and niches. And now that I have found my like niche market, like I can now provide services tailored to them. So it's like, instead of trying to guess, they've told me what they want and now I'll provide it. It's like, oh, people want me to review their sets. Okay, there's a link on my website. You can go submit your set and I'll review it. Or you want one-on-one coaching. Okay, here's a link to that. Like, people have told me what they want and now I just provide it. It really, when you find your audience and start listening and engaging with them, it takes away a lot of the guesswork. Not the work. It doesn't take away the work, but it takes away a lot of guessing of like, oh, what do I do next? It's like, well, listen to your audience. Ask them, what do they want? And that's really how I've been able to build up not only like my, here in Atlanta, my comedy school that I started, but also just all the online services I offer, all bloomed from just asking my audience, what do you want? And they'll tell you.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. I think too many people have this idea or this concept in their head that they know the way, or that they're somehow
I do know the way,
they're somehow leading their ship, when the reality is it's the crew that runs the ship, I mean, the captain might be up there, with final say or whatever, but without input from his crew, it's difficult to, really make the ship go. And so I think that's really good advice. Let's talk quickly, just because we're, getting towards the end of this thing. Let's talk quickly about your comedy school. What's that entail?
So like I mentioned, when I first started teaching, I was under another comedy theater I was teaching with. And then this past year, actually, I've been really focusing on lately, like the growth mindset, and really focusing on like just not the fixed mindset of it is what it is. It's like, no, you create what it is. So this year I actually took the leap, started my own comedy school, and it's grown into, I'll offer all different like array of services. I'll do a 6-week comedy course. I do one-off workshops on both stand-up comedy and podcasting. I've started doing workshops on. I now do a lot of like one-on-one coaching with people, which has been very interesting, of like someone may be having a speech coming up and they want help organizing it or adding punchlines to it. Like I've done things like that for people. Comedy is such a powerful tool that I've discovered through doing it, just how powerful it is. And everyone has the ability to be funny. They just may need to learn the tools to do it. And that's become part of like my passion, is like empowering people with comedy. So I think my wife calls it my comedy for everyone movement, where it's just comedy for everyone. You get comedy and you get comedy and you get comedy.
Thank you,
And
Oprah.
it's the most fulfilling time of my career so far, is that I finally have like discovered, 9.5 years in, of course, like people need to understand, 9.5 years in, and I by no means have conquered this idea. I have just now found the path, but it's all come down to just like helping people use comedy to whatever way they want. And it's a very versatile tool that I think everyone needs to be able to use.
It's also going to be kind of rewarding too, to coach someone through this and then see them jump on stage and do a good job. That's got to be kind of fun.
It's the best. It's almost as rewarding as doing it yourself when you have worked with someone and then you see them go kill it and you're like, yes, like it's very rewarding.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's really great.
Have you gone down the road into merch land? Have you done any merch sales and stuff like that?
Some I do have. My wife actually. I just started selling comedy for everyone's shirts. Literally like this week. Like it's the new mindset. Like it's all kind of just happened. So the timing of this interview is great.
Yeah.
But I have gone down the road of like I'll have a joke and then have a shirt about it. You know, I mean, a lot of comedians do that. But if you have a joke that involves a shirt, then you have to do the joke to sell the shirt. You know, you can't just say, I have this shirt with a catchphrase, but I don't want to do the joke, but you can buy it or whatever, you know. So it's like I'm trying to do more merch now based around, I have like podcast merch and more just things that are more of the Joel Byars brand in general, as opposed to just kind of like a tagline. So I have a Teespring store that's all linked from my website, and people can go check out all the merch I have there. It's also linked to my podcast site as well.
Excellent. Well, speaking of that, then, just as we sort of wrap this thing up, where can people find out more about you, learn about the school, all these things, and any other parting shots that you've got?
So my podcast website is hotbreathpodcast.com. I mean, on there's a blog on there, but there's also links to how you can support the show or support eggs as well. Like whatever podcast that's giving you value, return that value, because like,
yeah, what
these people are putting in a lot of work. Seriously, like a lot of work. So you can support Hot Breath Podcast. On there's also, we're on YouTube, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify. Anywhere there's a podcast, Hot Breath is on. The video is on YouTube. Joel Byars Comedy is my personal website. That's Byars.
And that's got your coaching and the school and all that stuff is available there, correct?
I have a comedy education blog on there that kind of I write blogs about like things I've learned through the podcast and personal experience. But also there's links to the school and all the coaching and more info about just me and what my mission is. So if you enjoyed this and like learned something and you just want to connect, my favorite thing to do is like connect with people online. I'm sure you guys may be able to agree with this, that like anytime you get an email that says it's from your website contact page, you're like, oh, this is gonna be good. You know, it's like they find you on your website and feel compelled to reach out through that. You're just like, oh, those are my favorite emails. So please, if you have any questions about comedy or you want to work together, just joelbyerscomedy.com and let's make it happen.
That's awesome. Well, cool, Joel. Thanks so much, man. We're really grateful that you were able to make this happen. Like you said, joelbyerscomedy.com. That's BYARS.com. And yeah, check him out. Follow him on all the socials. Are you still performing? Can people see you anywhere? Or do you have any upcoming events?
Oh, yeah. I'll be... I'm actually doing a kids comedy camp here in Atlanta in July. But I'll be in Chattanooga the first week of August. I'll also be in Birmingham the first week of September. And there's a whole I'm sorry, I have it all like in my phone. There's a schedule on my website and all that. And if you want to see me, reach out. You know, I'm mobile, so
I will come to you.
Perfect.
I host events and I'll do corporate events and holiday parties and just do stand-up or host events. Like I've done a little bit of everything. Whatever involves a microphone and being entertaining, I can do it.
I love it. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Joel. Glad we were able to finally connect and make this happen. And we'll see you again soon. So thanks to everybody who tuned in on the live stream, and everybody who will subsequently download this here in a couple weeks. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Reach out to the show, eggscast.com. And once again, our guest was Joel Byars. That's Byars. You can learn more at joelbyerscomedy.com. So, thanks everybody. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Joel.
Yep. Catch you later.